Tuesday night. You're sitting at your kitchen table with a spreadsheet open, a calculator app next to it, and a bank balance that hasn't moved in 4 months. You've been trying to save $10,000. You cut back on eating out. You canceled 2 subscriptions. You said no to the trip your friends are taking. You've been doing everything right, or at least everything the internet told you to do. And somehow, the number barely moves. Meanwhile, you've watched people online talk about going from $50,000 to $200,000 like it was just a matter of time, like the money practically saved itself. Here's what nobody tells you. They're not lying. It really does get easier, but not for the reason most people think. And the reason it's so hard at the beginning has nothing to do with discipline, willpower, or how smart you are with money. Today we're going to talk about why the first $10,000 is genuinely the hardest money you will ever save, and what happens on the other side of it that makes everything feel completely different. My name is Movo, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and the invisible forces that determine why some people quietly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same place for years, even when they're trying. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and still going nowhere financially, hit that subscribe button, because that's exactly what this channel is about. Let's get into it. Here's something nobody puts on a financial literacy poster. Saving money is not linear. Most people assume that saving the first $10,000 and saving the next $10,000 require roughly the same effort. Same income, same discipline, same timeline. That's what feels logical. But that's completely wrong. And understanding why it's wrong is the most important financial lesson most people never get. Let me give you a simple illustration. Imagine you're trying to start a fire with 2 wet sticks. You're rubbing them together. Nothing's happening. Your arms are burning. You're questioning every decision you've ever made. And then, finally, after what feels like forever, you get a tiny spark. That spark is your first $10,000. Now here's the thing about fire. Once you have a flame, it feeds itself. You don't have to keep working as hard. You just have to not pour water on it. Money works the exact same way. But most people give up during the rubbing sticks phase. They get 3 months in, see almost no progress, and conclude that wealth building simply isn't for people like them. It is. They just didn't know about the spark. Here's the actual math that changes everything. When you have $0 saved and you put away $500 a month, you are the only engine. Every single dollar in that account came directly from your labor, your time, your sacrifice. You have $10,000 saved and earning a conservative 8% annual return in an index fund. Your money is generating roughly $67 every single month, on top of whatever you're contributing. That's not a lot. Not yet. But here's what matters. You didn't earn that $67, you didn't work for it. You didn't wake up early for it. You didn't skip lunch for it. It just appeared because the money you already saved went to work while you were sleeping. That's the first taste of what wealthy people experience every single day at scale. And it starts, in a small but very real way, at $10,000. But the math is only half the story. Because here's what I really want you to understand. The reason the first $10,000 feels so impossibly hard isn't just financial. It's neurological. There's a concept in behavioral economics called scarcity mindset. And it's not just a buzzword. It's a measurable, documented change in how your brain actually functions when resources feel tight. In 2013, researchers Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir published a landmark study showing that financial scarcity, the constant awareness that you don't have enough, consumes cognitive bandwidth the same way a demanding task does. Think about that for a second. Your brain has a limited amount of processing power. When you're stressed about money, a portion of that processing power is permanently allocated to running financial calculations in the background. How much is in the account? Can I afford this? What happens if something breaks? Will I make it to next paycheck? You didn't choose to run those calculations, they just run, automatically, all the time. The researchers found this cognitive tax is equivalent to losing about 13 IQ points. Not because poor people are less intelligent, but because their mental bandwidth is being consumed by a problem that never goes away. And here's the cruel part. That cognitive tax makes it harder to make the very decisions that would fix the problem. When you're in scarcity mode, your brain prioritizes short-term relief over long-term gain. Every single time. Not because you're weak, because that's literally how the brain is wired under stress. It's a survival mechanism that made perfect sense 10,000 years ago and is absolutely destroying people financially in 2026. This is why someone who is broke can know, intellectually, that they should save money and still find it nearly impossible to do it consistently. It's not laziness, it's neuroscience. Now here's the flip side, and this is the part that should genuinely excite you. Once you build even a small financial cushion, research from Vanguard shows that even $2,000 in savings increases financial well-being by 21%. Your brain starts to quiet down. The background calculations slow, the cognitive bandwidth gets freed up. And when you push that to $10,000, you cross a threshold where your brain stops operating in pure survival mode. You go from reactive to proactive, from how do I survive this month to how do I grow this money. That is not a small shift. That is everything. Everyone has heard of compound interest. Einstein supposedly called it the eighth wonder of the world, though honestly, there's no proof he actually said that. But whoever said it wasn't wrong. Here's the problem. Compound interest sounds incredible in theory, but when you're starting from zero, it feels like a scam. Let's run the real numbers. You invest $500 a month. You earn 8% annually, which is a reasonable long-term average for a diversified index fund portfolio. In your first year, you've contributed $6,000. Your investment returns have added about $250. $250 after a full year of discipline and sacrifice. If you were expecting to feel the magic of compound interest, that number is deeply unimpressive. And a lot of people look at that $250 and decide this whole investing thing is overrated. But watch what happens as the base grows. By the time you've reached $50,000, which at $500 a month takes roughly 7 years, your annual investment returns are adding about $4,000 a year. That's $333 a month the market is contributing on top of your $500. You now have a co-contributor that works for free and never calls in sick. At $100,000, the market is adding roughly $8,000 a year, more than $660 a month in returns alone. At $250,000, your portfolio generates about $20,000 a year in returns. That's $1,766 per month showing up in your account from money that's already there. At this point, your investments are contributing more per month than most people's entire savings rate. That's the secret wealthy people understand that nobody else talks about. It's not that they're smarter. It's that they got to the part of the graph where the line goes vertical, and they stayed. The first $10,000 is you pushing the boulder uphill, alone, with no help. Every dollar after that is a tiny hand reaching out to push alongside you. And the more you accumulate, the more hands appear, until one day the boulder is moving faster than you can push, and you realize you don't even need to push anymore. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people quit during the uphill part, not because they're failures, because nobody told them the hill had a top. Let me introduce you to someone. We'll call her Maya. Maya is 28. She makes $52,000 a year, roughly the median individual income in the US. She's been trying to save $10,000 for 2 years. She's not spending recklessly. She doesn't have a shopping addiction. She's not eating out every night. On paper, she should be able to do this. What Maya's actual month looks like. Rent, well, $400, that's 32% of her take-home pay before she's bought a single thing. Car payment, $420. Because she needed a reliable car to get to work, and used cars weren't as cheap as everyone told her they'd be. Insurance, $180, groceries, $320, phone, $85, student loan, $280, utilities, $120. Subscriptions she actually uses, $45. That's $2,850 before we've talked about gas, toiletries, clothing, medical copays, or anything unexpected. Her take-home after tax is about $3,400. That leaves $550 a month, in a perfect month. Except every month has something. A car repair, a medical bill, a friend's wedding she's in, a flight home for the holidays, a laptop that finally gave up. These aren't luxuries. These are the ordinary costs of being a functioning adult in 2026. And every time one of them hits, it takes a month or two of savings with it. This is why the first $10,000 takes so long for most people. Not because they're bad at money, because the structural cost of modern life, rent, transport, debt repayment, consumes such a high percentage of median income that the margin for saving is razor thin. Now here's what changes when Maya finally crosses $10,000. The math is the same, the income is the same, but two things shift dramatically. First, She has a buffer. When the car repair comes, it doesn't wipe out her progress. It dips into the buffer. The savings account survives. Second, the account stops feeling abstract. $10,000 is real money. It's visible. It has momentum. And there is a very well-documented psychological phenomenon. Researchers call it the goal gradient effect, where people accelerate their effort as they get closer to a visible goal. Once Maya sees $10,000 become $11,000, then $12,000, without a single emergency destroying it, her behavior changes. She starts treating saving as permanent, not temporary, and that behavioral shift is worth more than any interest rate. Here's something that will probably sound strange, but stay with me. The most valuable thing you build on the way to your first $10,000 isn't the money. It's the identity. When you're trying to save and failing, or saving very slowly, you unconsciously carry the identity of someone who isn't good with money. You don't think of yourself as a future wealthy person. You think of yourself as someone who is trying. That distinction matters more than most financial advice will ever acknowledge, because your behavior follows your identity, not the other way around. When you see yourself as someone who can't save, every financial decision gets filtered through that lens. The occasional splurge feels inevitable, because that's just who you are. The savings account feels like a temporary thing, because you don't really believe it'll last. But when you cross $10,000, and more importantly, when you protect it through your first real financial emergency, something quietly shifts. You are now someone who has $10,000 saved. That's a fact, not an aspiration, a fact. And that factual identity change ripples into every financial decision you make going forward. You start asking different questions. Instead of, can I afford this? You ask, is this worth it given what I'm building? That's not a small shift in wording. It's a completely different operating system. Thomas Corley spent 5 years studying self-made millionaires and found that 88% of them described a specific moment, not when they hit a big number, but when they first genuinely believed they were capable of building wealth. For most of them, that moment came early, and it was usually tied to a relatively small but meaningful financial win. The first $10,000 is that win for most people. It's the proof of concept, the evidence that you can do this, not because someone told you, because you did it. Okay, let's get practical. Because inspiration without a plan is just a feeling. Here's the actual sequence that works, backed by behavioral research, not just motivation. Step 1, shrink the goal. $10,000 is too big to feel real when you're starting from zero. Your brain doesn't do well with distant abstract targets. So break it down. Your first target is $1,000, that's it. $1,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account, untouched. Why $1,000 first? Because FEMA data shows that 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing. $1,000 puts you in the top half of financial resilience immediately. It changes how a bad month feels. Once you hit $1,000, your new target is $3,000. Then $5,000, then $10,000. Small wins compound psychologically the same way money compounds mathematically. Step 2, automate before your brain interferes. The single most effective savings behavior, confirmed by every piece of behavioral economics research, is automation. Set up an automatic transfer on the day you get paid. Not a few days later. Not when you remember. The same day. Before you can see the money sitting in checking and unconsciously factor it into your spending. Even $100 a month automated beats $300 a month manually moved, because the manual transfer requires a decision, and decisions are where we talk ourselves out of things. Step 3. Use a separate, slightly inconvenient account. Keep your savings in a different bank from your checking account. Ideally, a high-yield savings account. Right now, those are paying around 4 to 5% annually, which means your money is actually growing while it sits there. The slight friction of transferring money between banks is not a bug. It's the feature. You want saving to be automatic and spending from savings to require effort. Step 1. Shrink the goal. $10,000 is too big to feel real when you're starting from zero. Your brain doesn't do well with distant abstract targets. So break it down. Your first target is $1,000, that's it. $1,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account untouched. Why $1,000 first? Because FEMA data shows that 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing. $1,000 puts you in the top half of financial resilience immediately. It changes how a bad month feels. Once you hit $1,000, your new target is $3,000. Then $5,000, then $10,000. Small wins compound psychologically the same way money compounds mathematically. Step 2. Automate before your brain interferes. The single most effective savings behavior, confirmed by every piece of behavioral economics research, is automation. Set up an automatic transfer on the day you get paid. Not a few days later. Not when you remember. The same day. Before you can see the money sitting in checking and unconsciously factor it into your spending. Even $100 a month automated beats $300 a month manually moved, because the manual transfer requires a decision, and decisions are where we talk ourselves out of things. Step 3. Use a separate, slightly inconvenient account. Keep your savings in a different bank from your checking account. Ideally, a high-yield savings account. Right now, those are paying around 4 to 5% annually, which means your money is actually growing while it sits there. The slight friction of transferring money between banks is not a bug, it's the feature. You want saving to be automatic and spending from savings to require effort. Step 4. Find one big lever, not 10 small ones. The personal finance internet loves to tell you to cut your coffee and cancel your subscriptions. And look, those things add up. But they're not going to get you to $10,000 any faster in a meaningful way. The real levers are housing, transportation, and income. If you can reduce your rent by $300 a month, through a roommate, a different neighborhood, or a smaller place, that's $3,600 a year. That's more than a year's worth of coffee savings. If you can avoid a car payment by buying used with cash or add one income stream that brings in $400 a month, those are the moves that actually accelerate the timeline. The small cuts matter. The big cuts are where the timeline actually compresses. Step 5. Protect it like it's already worth $1 million. Because mathematically it is. A dollar saved at 25, invested in a diversified index fund, earning 8% annually, is worth approximately $21 at age 65. That $10,000 you save today isn't worth $10,000. It's worth $210,000 in future purchasing power if you leave it alone. Every time you're tempted to dip into it for something non-emergency, remember that you're not spending $500. You're spending $10,500 in future money. That reframe alone has kept a lot of savings accounts intact. Let's go back to Maya. It takes her 26 months, not the 20 she planned, because there were 2 unexpected expenses and 1 month where she just broke and needed to breathe. But she gets there. And the first thing she notices isn't the number, it's the silence. The 2 a.m. mental arithmetic, how much is in checking, what hits Friday, what happens if something breaks. It gets quieter. Not completely gone, but quieter. She starts getting better sleep, genuinely. Not because she read an article about sleep hygiene, because a background process her brain was running constantly just got turned off. Her boss offers a project with more responsibility, but a 6-month timeline before any raise kicks in. Before, she would have hesitated. She needed the income certainty. Now she takes it. Because she has a cushion. Because she can afford to think about the next 6 months, not just the next paycheck. She doesn't spend the $10,000. She doesn't even touch it. But the fact that it exists changes every decision she makes. 6 months later, she's at $14,000. The rate of accumulation surprised her. It felt faster. Because it was. The math was doing more of the work. That's not a fairy tale. That's compound interest and behavioral science working together. And it starts, in a real, tangible way, at $10,000. Look, the first $10,000 is genuinely hard. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. It's hard because the math works against you at the start. It's hard because your brain is running on scarcity mode. It's hard because modern life is expensive and margins are thin, and nobody sat you down at 22 and explained any of this. But here's what I need you to hear before you close this video. The difficulty doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing it at the hardest possible point. The point that most people quit. The point where the effort is highest and the visible reward is lowest. If you are anywhere on the journey to your first $10,000, even at $200, even starting over after a setback, you are doing the hardest part. The part that compounds into everything. Don't pour water on the spark. The boulder gets easier, the hands appear, the math starts working for you instead of against you, but only if you're still in the game when it happens. Start the transfer today, even if it's small, especially if it's small. Your future self is going to look back at this exact moment, this Tuesday night at the kitchen table with the spreadsheet open, and understand that this was when it actually started. If this video helped you see money differently, drop a like. It genuinely helps this reach people who need to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't, because this is exactly the kind of thing we talk about every week. Not financial advice, just the patterns that keep showing up in people who end up with options versus people who end up